had a call earlier from someone that's purchased, I think he's purchased the land across from, down Woodland 100, across from Queen's new house.
Oh,
Have you talked with anybody?
yeah.
Yeah.
He's been talking about building a event center.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, what?
An event center. Where you go
Host weddings and receptions and things. So I own property next to it,
Yeah,
and he has thoughts of the property next to it. As you go away from the road, it goes up. There's a spot that goes up quite. It doesn't look it, but it goes up quite a way, and you have a view all the way over the Dixmont Hills,
oh really?
over my fields.
Yeah.
His land goes around the back of it because it was all the same parcel of land.
Like a narrow strip that goes.
Right, it goes up between because that was all the same piece of property at one time, and so he wants to go up behind that with just a place for viewing or take photographs, and wanted to know about clearing some of the trees on my side. You know, there's not a lot there, and I don't really have an issue with that. But I did tell him that, you know, this is right next to operating farmland, and there are occasional days that, you know, might not be quite as nice as others. Yeah, and he understood it. And I told him, I said, I work with other people that, you know, if there's certain things coming on or coming up, you know, we try to work around things, not to. But I asked him if he had unlimited funds. He says, why? I said, to go from where you're talking, from there up to there, that's a lot of gravel for even just a small driveway.
Mm.
Yeah, you're probably talking quarter mile,
Yeah.
and a couple of areas go through some, you know, rather soft ground. I told him, I said, you know, some areas you probably can get away with a foot of gravel, and other areas you might want 3 feet of gravel to stay above the water table. But he's gonna, I told him to come down, he's gonna come down Thursday afternoon, and I'll go over things with him a little bit,
Yeah.
just to, you know, kind of see what his thoughts are.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it is 1 minute after 7. This is a work session, so we can get started. I was expecting 2 people here tonight in the audience, but I guess not. So, Steve set out the agenda. Ron, do you have something that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I just so Brett and I have had a very brief conversation about the site plan review process. We haven't been able to get into anything solid in terms of like cut this line or add this line because his schedule is very busy during the summer, so we're planning on doing that this winter. But I wanted to touch base with all of you to see if you had any input, you know, things that you had observed, areas of, you know, congestion or things that needed to be improved before we started to get too far into he and I sitting down and going through it line by line. So, any thoughts?
I would say I haven't had time to do much research, but yeah, I can't point out any specific thing that comes to mind, but it just seems like there's quite a bit involved, a lot more of it involved than probably should be on some aspects.
Do you mean that the requirements are too stringent, or do you mean that the process is too complicated?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
I don't think we can do anything about the requirements.
No, I don't think we can.
Well,
That's written in the ordinance. So.
right.
The way it's presented, we're working on 3 sections of a review.
Right.
A lot of it
Is repeat.
yeah, there's a lot of redundancy in the whole thing.
What are we talking about?
The site plan review, when we give somebody a building permit, we go through that whole process of, you know, asking everything, you know, anything that pertains to it, right? And a lot of the review is just, we're working on 3 sections and we do the same thing twice a lot of times. It can be, I don't know, it could rewritten and still contain all the information, or contain all the questions that we need.
How is I'm trying to remember, so site plan review, how is the application distributed? Is it a paper copy? Is that what they
Yeah,
receive?
paper copy. I mean,
So-
we have what we have is on our, in the computer, on the G drive there. I lost my train of thought, excuse me. Yeah, I have an odd sample application. I give them with the instructions on how to fill it out, write the answer to the question, and bold italic type under each question. I send them also a copy of the application in that same email, a letter of introduction saying when the planning board meetings are and so forth, and what the fees are. So I just have that so I can just click on it and just, of course, send the whole thing on.
I mean, one thing that seems from a start would be digitizing it into a form as opposed to a Word document or whatever it would be, like a PDF form that has fields that would be easy and drop downs. It would be easy just to fill out. You could easily have a hypertext link that would link to information that says, this is an example of documentation that could be utilized for this piece, right? Like these are so that it's all in one. Because like when we fill out building permits for a lot of towns, we just get them as digital PDF forms, and we basically are typing in all of that information. And it seems like with this being so complex, it would lend itself very well to having a section and then questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yes or no. Is this going to impact? Like for instance, is this going to impact? Is this going to change traffic patterns on the site? Yes or no? Click a box. If yes, explain, and then, you could have a link to something on traffic studies or something, whatever. I think that would probably help, or it could even be, it could be even as easy as like you do this with a Google form, with the Google Docs, like you can put out they could do it online. Everyone, I think most people here probably use like a Google form before, where it just is like put in your name, put in this, put in that. It just seems like there's some technology pieces here that would be super helpful and actually make it easier for us to distribute information internally on the planning board.
One of the things that I've been thinking about from our end, there's a lot of the application is submitted and then it's reviewed at the next meeting, and then they go back and then it's reviewed at the next meeting, and the pre-application and then the follow-up and then the actual application. And one of the things I was wondering is if it would be possible to cut out some of that, wait 30 days until the next meeting and just have us all do a digital sign-off with a digital signature on, yeah, the pre-approval's good, we can just talk about this at the next meeting and get it approved in 30 days as opposed to 60 or 90. Does that seem like everybody would be, is that something we could do?
Yeah, is that anything legal wise? Throw a red flag?
Well, if we change our ordinance, we can reword our ordinance, so we'll go through the proper process to change it, we can change it, no problem there.
Yeah, because anything that shortens the process makes it a lot better.
Right.
The pre-application meeting was just to give a person the idea to present it and see what you guys thought of the whole idea. That was the reason behind it.
Yeah, and I think the pre-application is still a good idea, right? But I think that if all of the pre-application material were submitted and say everybody on the planning board had a week or 2 weeks to review it, and then they could do a digital signature on it and say, yes, I'm good with this pre-application, go ahead and submit, we'll talk about it at the next meeting, then we could expedite the process considerably. Now, the only thing that would require, I think, from the planning board is a little bit of commitment to do that pre-application review outside of these meetings. So that would be a change in, I think, our duties that we might need to consider. Just as long as everybody's comfortable with that.
I think as long as it came out a couple weeks ahead, even busy, sometimes you should be able to find a little bit of time within a couple weeks.
It also should be very clear, you know, so we don't go into gray areas and all of a sudden we're floundering, don't really wanna say okay to this now. If there's questions, you know,
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I don't think we're gonna have to make any decisions outside of this meeting, but we could at least acquaint ourselves with
Right.
what's there. And you make the decisions right here.
Right, yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
we're meeting.
Because of the, we would need to do a public notice and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
can't. I think we all have to be, you know, you can have a digital sign off that you received it, you read it, you understand it, but we actually have to be here to vote on it.
Right.
And I'm thinking of the pre-application pieces, it seems like there's two reasons people come before us. One is to demystify the process. The other is to ask for some clarification on something that might be perceived to be outside of the standard guidelines, right? Do we need to have a site plan? Might be one reason, which we're gonna have to have a meeting about, I would think, right? But sometimes people come in and say, it's not clear what is going on with this particular piece, and we say, well, why don't you know, we had one of those go on with the subdivision one recently, right? I guess it seems to me there's a couple of pieces there, and I keep hearing from folks who just feel like the site plan, the site plan review process is really unwieldy, just the entry to it, not knowing what it is, not knowing what's needed. And to me, that's not a planning board function. It seems to me like it's having the town have sufficient resources so that that's a straightforward process. I frequently ask questions about the site plan review process. What does the site plan review process look like, right? Like these documents that allow people to get like a non-ordinancy, right, introduction to it, which is what it seems like. That's what I hear now, is folks are asking lots of questions and not sure about it, and where coming straight here could potentially be so I feel like there's maybe a couple pieces here. One is, I think there's probably procedure pieces that can be put into place, right, to demystify that so it doesn't have to come to the planning board for a pre-application process. And then there are the cases when, you know, like for instance, what if someone came in, what are the benefits of having a pre-application, going through the pre-application process? When are the situations when you should do that? Right.
It does help you understand the zoning requirements for where you are, in case you know, you just can't assume that what you're applying for is zoned, you know what I mean.
Right. I guess what I'm getting at is it's a limitate right now. It's us stepping in for a stopgap where there should already be information, right?
Yeah.
Like people should be able to access information on what zone they're in the town of Pittsfield and know what those pieces are.
Yeah.
There should be a map besides one that hangs. I don't know where they are. They must have been taken in, right? Besides one that hangs in the council chambers that sometimes are out of date, like we found, to be able to access, because everyone's, right? It's not just the time constraint of the 2 weeks or the 4 weeks to get in here for the meeting. It's also people's work schedules and everything else. How much of our business do we spend online? Like 90% of it. Like the town, if it is in customer service, needs to have resources that fit with its constituents. And some of this stuff I would advocate that we send, you know, recommendations on what those needs are, right? Like it's very easy to put together information that people can. It's just a matter of time and resources, I think, right?
No, you're assuming people are going to read that information.
But right now, but then you put it and make it accessible,
Yeah.
and then, right? That's the whole idea of customer service, is you try and put together tools that serve 80% of the population and then deal with the outliers
Yeah.
right, when they come, so that you're spending your amount of time on the people that need it, as opposed to making the process more onerous for 80% of people that could just take the tools and go do what they need to do with them.
Yeah, I think the process can be simplified, but I wouldn't trust somebody, just because the laws are there and plainly written and should be understood by anybody. I don't assume that they're gonna understand them or read them or care, That's part of what the pre-process is to let them know all the different details that they have to attend to.
It just seems inefficient, if this is something that we do several times a year, it just seems inefficient to go
Well,
through the
it
same
is,
process
but
with applicants.
Do you think everybody's gonna take it on themselves to understand the rules? And that's what I'm saying, I don't see people doing that all the time.
I guess a question for Steve. What do you see as the biggest bottleneck in the process?
Well, one of the things is, I think that our new employee, Mike, could probably get those maps online so that people would have access to them, the zoning map, so they could figure out what zone they're in. The other thing is that I think it might be streamlined is provisions where you people could decide that a site plan meeting wasn't required. If it met this criteria, that criteria, that would shorten things up if we had the method of saying you don't need to have a site plan review if it's a simple project or straightforward or something like that.
I think in a lot of cases we could dispense with it, but I'm just saying, the other 20%, what happens then?
So, but still stay with that thought for a second. So who's gonna be the final say in terms of whether a site plan needs to be done or not?
Well, it has to be us.
Planning board vote.
The
Yeah.
planning board vote.
So you would criteria that the project would have to meet to qualify for not having a site plan review.
And somehow we would have to know that all the requirements were met by the applicant.
Right,
That would be, we can't just,
But it lays out here, right? There's the applicability of the site plan review that's laid out here. You got 9 steps here.
But that would come before you first, and then at that point, would you, Steve, give us the yes or no that these things are met? We don't need the site plan review, and then we vote on it or sign off on it now?
I guess that's where I was going with that question.
I think that you people should decide whether one's needed or not me.
Well, but I guess we could make the decision, but if there's nine things that need to be a yes or no, that would determine it yes or no. Do those 9 questions absolutely determine yes or no that we need a site plan review?
yeah, somehow we would have to have all the information in order to say that we don't need a site.
Well, I don't think that's true. I need to cross the street to get home. Does that have to go to a site plan review to the planning board of the town of Pittsfield?
Well, I don't see how that relates.
Not unless it's a divided highway.
But why not? What?
That's
But no, please let's go through that process. Why does the site plan review have nothing to do with it?
The site plan, they have to meet electrical requirements, they have to meet plumbing and sewage requirements. There's a lot of, we have to know whether it's a shoreline zoning problem or not. We have to know.
But you know right off the bat that me crossing the street is not subject to a site plan review.
Yeah, but you don't need a permit to cross the street.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. There are a set of pieces in which we can give Steve discretion to say.
Oh yeah, there are. But
Right, so we don't need to have a site plan review, and this lays it out, right?
But we still have to understand that criteria is met.
But shouldn't these applications be very specific in what they're asking so that the answers that we do need are right there on these applications? So it explains itself that you meet this, don't need a site plan evaluation.
Because that's basically, that's why we're here, is to make sure that the applicant is actually fulfilling the requirements for that application. And we can't just say, well, somebody told us it was okay, then so we'll forget about it.
But I don't think, I think there are criteria that are laid out in the ordinances that say, if you're doing these things, right, the construction, alteration, or enlargement of a single family or two-family dwelling, including accessory buildings and structures, it does not require a site plan review.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty clear.
Yeah, so in that case, we don't need one.
So in that case, we don't need one. But if it meets one of the other criteria that says we do need one, for example, the expansion of an existing non-residential building or structure, including accessory buildings that increases the total floor area, that requires a site plan review. So in those situations, Steve can say, the ordinance says this, you don't need a site plan review. The ordinance says this, you do need a site plan review, and then it can come to us. And
One of
we
the
can
things-
determine zoning and whether they have all the information there.
Example I can think of is, for say that the little building down here that processes blueberries, all of a sudden wants to double its size, because now it's gonna process something else.
Mhm.
That would be one that I would think perhaps wouldn't need a site plan review. It's in an industrial park, not really changing the business, it's.
Yeah,
But the ordinance says it would be.
Yeah.
I'm seeing this as like a checkbox, like kind of Ron put down there. Are you expanding an existing non-residential building or structure, including accessory buildings that increases the total floor area? If you check yes, need a site plan review, right? Like,
But why would you think that?
because we have an ordinance here that says that that's the applicability of the site
Well,
plan.
yeah,
review.
we're talking about just changing the ordinance.
We're not talking about changing that part of the ordinance, though.
Well, I don't know. They're looking for the way to streamline it. And what I'm saying is that there may be cases like the one I just adding on to the Woodbury building, in an approved area, without changing the business. Why would you need that to have a site plan review? I think it's a square footage qualification.
Okay.
Permeability, infringement on wetlands, increased traffic flow, like that's what that whole site plan's for, right? So that's what we get at. I mean, this thing lays out exactly. I mean, to me, when I look at this, I see, like Roy said, there's some repetitive things where it's like, did you fill out the form about this part? And did you actually satisfy the requirements of this part that could be like grouped together? But as far as like, it just seems very user unfriendly to start with, which seems to me the first hurdle to clear in terms of just setting this up. Like, it would be great if the plan, if we just had like should you have a site plan review, and we just had a bunch of check boxes, and if any of them are yes, Steve knows, like, Steve could hand out this thing and say, here's the worksheet, or, go online and take a look at it. If any of these are yes, it goes site plan review.
Steve, what's the most common request for something what's the most common request that comes into town that might require a site plan review?
A new business with a new building. Somebody wants to put a different facility up there to the industrial park.
Okay.
If one of the main streets, the business that goes out, and 6 months later, 2 months later, a new one goes back in there, we wouldn't consider that would need a site plan review.
So let's use this as an example. So all of a sudden, somebody comes to town and they say, we want to put in this is just an example, okay, a gift shop where the old pharmacy used to be down by the pond. Would that require a site plan review?
It's a retail, they're both retail uses. It probably wouldn't increase the traffic much more than the original business. That would be one that we might say wouldn't need a site plan review.
We would or we wouldn't?
Wouldn't. If it doesn't have, it talks about impact to traffic and off-site off-site impacts and so forth, so.
Right, so if somebody wants to take that piece of property and put in a kayak and canoe rental place and a restaurant, would that require a site plan review?
You'd have to study that a little bit more, I guess.
Not based on the ordinance,
Yeah,
not based on our site plan ordinance.
Not based on it.
No.
it wouldn't based on the way it
Right.
is.
Yeah.
The site plan is new construction, change of use, increasing on-site or off-site impacts, increasing the intensity of on-site or off-site impacts. That's fundamentally like the big pieces in this. And that's why I say it should be easy for us just to, right? Someone's coming and renting a new space on Main Street and renovating the inside of the building, no site plan review. They have to deal with building permits, but they don't have to go through a site plan review. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. I feel like it's become complex because I think we've been having more people come in for application meetings and so forth that clearly don't apply to the 9 things that are laid out here.
There's, I think it could be streamlined. I guess question I want to know is, the answer to the question is, if we make changes, is this, are we rewriting the ordinance, and does that go through the whole ordinance process?
Yeah, if we make changes, we've got to go through that process.
So we can streamline it, and we can make it easier, but then it's going to have to go through us, the whole process, and through the town council.
Well, streamlining, I don't think does. I mean, this is a policy, and we're talking. I mean, I think there are some procedures that we can help guide, right? A policy, if we want to change a policy or an ordinance, that requires us going through.
Yeah,
but process and procedure, that's a management and town stuff that we can provide some recommendations to without it.
Yeah, we can
changing the fundamental nature of this.
We can't change the content of what's.
Right.
Steve, has anybody
But I still don't know if we, the way the ordinance is written, it's written in it's the town ordinance. If we can streamline it for our own use, so when somebody comes before us, then, we've got all our questions laid out, and, if one question relates to 2 or 3 parts of the ordinance, it could be referenced as relating to 2 or 3 parts of the ordinance. And that would make our job, and whoever's sitting in those chairs, simple, that would make it easier, it would be faster. As far as the way the whole thing goes together, that's something I don't know. I don't think we can just rewrite this ordinance and streamline it and call it good, because I think it has to go before just us to make changes in any way.
Right, and I think we're talking about 2 things though, right? One is streamlining, which happens without changing the ordinance. The other is
we can streamline it as we, the way we work it in this group. But to change the ordinance, change the way the ordinance is written, would have to go through a whole process.
Right.
And I think there are places where we can streamline without changing, and there are places where it might be appropriate to change the language in the ordinance. And I think that where we find those places, we should follow that process.
But I think, and I'm going to go out on a limb, but I think if we can streamline it without changing the substance of the ordinance, I don't know if would we have to go through a public hearing for that?
I believe we would, if we're
That's,
changing the wording.
Yeah.
Well, we're not changing the wording. So there's a section right here that says, so pre-application. Prior to submitting a formal application, the applicant and his or her representative may request a pre-application conference with the planning board. The pre-application conference shall be informal and informational in nature. There shall be no fee for a pre-application process. No decision on the substance of the plan shall be made at the pre-application conference. So we can do that part, right? And then the next part says we can grant waivers, and then skipping down, at the first meeting at which the application is considered, the planning board shall give a dated receipt of the application. Prior to this meeting, the town shall notify by first-class mail all property owners within 200 feet. Written notice of the pending application shall also be submitted to Public Works, so on and so forth. It says a lot about certain things need to be submitted in writing, and certain things need to be done here, and certain things need to be done here, but nothing says that the application cannot be changed from a Word document or a PDF that's handed to somebody or sent to somebody and an interactive form online, right? And that is something that Vaughn brought up that we could very easily do that fits within the language of the ordinances as written without changing or reinterpreting any words. And I don't think that requires a public hearing, right? Only to the extent that we would want people to know that we're changing it.
That's what I'm getting at. I'd like to get, it would be nice to have a process like this go forward without having to go through a public hearing, just because, and you know, you could put the questions you would ask online. You could, well, it's like anything, you can look up an ordinance from the state of Maine. A lot of times what you get is a little link and there's a lot of references to various parts. And that's what you read. And we could do the same thing, we could have various parts that are referenced.
Right.
In case somebody really wanted to know the questions they're answering.
Right.
One of the things that frustrates me about it is the fact that the first part of the ordinance addresses what the applicant has to supply for information. And the second part of it is what you guys use to make up your mind whether to approve it or not. Seems like those two could be combined somehow.
Well, I think that's the piece that's missing is right now, like we all mostly went to school in which there was a curriculum that the teachers had to teach by, right? And you have to, if you're in an earth science class, you have to be able to show this, 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 and this. You never get, you know, they very rarely give to the students 2.2, student must do such, and such, right? The teachers deliver it in a way that is digestible. You get exams that don't reference that, but the teacher's job, right, is to see whether the student, they're presenting information so the student gets it, and then the student's able to demonstrate it, right? This ordinance is not meant, as this is written, to be front-facing to the customers, which are the town payers, the business, you know, the taxpayers, the businesses, etc. Just the guidance for what, you know, what Ron said, and I think, you know, you hit on it too, Royce, which is, you know, we need to make, again, this more user-friendly, and it doesn't, this is just what it has to have. It doesn't, we don't have to do it in this order, we don't have to do anything, we just have to make sure that the process meets these outcomes, right?
How many people have actually started the process and then get partway through it and say, this is ridiculous, and turn around and walk out?
I don't think there's been very many. But I coach them along a bit. It was my idea to give them a form where they could write the answer to the question underneath the question. When I came here, everybody retyped the whole thing. And so I fixed that, and then, you know, I kind of, you know, I advise them of what they should do.
Yeah, and I think that steps like that are exactly what we're talking about, right? Like the idea that somebody would have to retype every single question and then type in every single answer just is baffling, right?
Yeah.
And so why don't we just have a space underneath the question where they can answer?
We do have that.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
We have that now. So is there an evolution of that same concept where if we have a map, if they don't know where their site is and what the zoning requirements are, do we have a map where they can point at a spot with their cursor and it comes up with a pop-up bubble that says, here's what zone you're in, here are the requirements, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. Each of these things are hyperlinks so that you can go directly to the ordinance, right?
I could talk with Mike about that. He's pretty good with the computers and understands them. And that's something that I've thought for a long time. We need to get those zoning maps online so people can. It just saves us a lot of time. Real estate people call me all the time. What zone is such and such a property in? Right? And then I've got to go look it up. I got more important things to do, really, but if we could find a way so they can answer that question themselves.
Right.
I don't know whether it's worth a suggestion, but Peak came in here and talked about investing money in various digital pieces already. I wonder, some of this stuff I think is just better. The folks that work in town already have a ton of hats that they're wearing, and right, like having somebody come in and that does this and just maybe talk to Peak and say one way that you could achieve your mission is by making an investment in streamlining this process so that it's very straightforward to businesses when they come and look what the process is going to be like for them.
I think they're kind of on the edge of that, to some respects, but.
And I'd be surprised if there's not another town somewhere out there in the wilds of the United States that's gone through this same process. Right. And so there's no reason that we can't reach out. You know, I mean, we have a new group in town that does that's interested in this type of work. There's no reason we can't reach out to our network to see what other towns have done. Right? I mean, there are coders and computer techs and all kinds of people working all over the place doing this.
That's a great idea.
So.
Most towns have their commitment books right online. The little town of Heartland does. I can bring up the commitment card. I can tell what piece of property it's in and what zone it's in, all of that. If we could get it so that they could look at the map and lot numbers up there, and when they got the map and lot number of that lot and said what zone it was in, that would solve that problem.
Well, so as I understand it, the maps are stored. The maps and the tax cards are all stored on that computer that's in that office, the most current copies. Is that
Or
right?
on my computer, yeah. We have what's called Trio, and we all have access to it. That work, but it's not online. You can't get the information in Harlan. You can get the acreage of the land. You get the value, you get the taxes. All you
An
need.
ordinary citizen can do that.
Yeah.
I do that in tons of towns when we're looking at projects. Pull the real estate cards up.
So we just need to. I mean, that's a perfect example, right? We can reach out to Heartland and say, "How'd you do that?
Yeah.
Give us the code. We're going to copy it. Thanks for the donation." You know.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's the same thing. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to figure out how they made the wheel.
I can find that out. Did I tell you people that I'm on the planning board of the town of Harlan?
You did not. Congratulations.
Moment of weakness.
Should we congratulate you or send
No,
you a sympathy
you
card?
need to know it.
Steve, what do you do for fun at home? Why work on planning with you? Okay.
Okay, so I think we have a general idea about the direction we'd like to move, and we're gonna actually combine with Heartland.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I'll keep batting around.
Well, the two committees can join together, Heartland and Pittsfield.
Yeah.
We called, no, never mind.
Hartfield.
Hartfield. Okay. Everybody comfortable with that up to this point? So you know what your task is?
Well, it looks like I'm going to talk about getting the maps online.
No, it looks like you're gonna, yeah, right. Okay, second item. Temporary signs and adequacy bond.
Oh, let me pick this up again. Yeah, so I guess we had chatted about, I guess this would have been in, what was this, April? We chatted just about what planning board, because we kind of have examined what the planning board can do to impact planning in Pittsfield. One of the pieces that I just kind of put forward was, we have some limitations on what we can do per the charter, but one of the things that we can do is, to help look at where there may be some places. Here's one in the site plan review ordinance, and then one in the zoning ordinance that more accurately, I think, pinpoint what the comprehensive plan is looking for. And so I just picked, these were two that I had picked, and we had kind of talked about generally back at that meeting in terms of ways that the planning board could support that. So on one side was the zoning ordinance, which was right now there's nothing in our zoning ordinances that prohibits temporary signs for anything going up really. And so, I mean, it does have a limitation on, you know, permits that are erected for longer than 90 days within a 12-month period. Some exemptions there for real estate signs, etc. You know, I think as I looked at the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plan talking about the entry on Somerset Avenue into Pittsfield and the importance of that in terms of welcoming people into the village and promoting just kind of a nice visual. And I know other people on the planning board, most recently Simone, had talked about the importance of, you know, what that does look like coming down that hill into town. And we do have some folks that are putting up a bunch of temporary signs in between there, everything from advertising employment to advertising cigarettes to advertising, you know, whatever else is going on. Culottes, right? So, you know, one of the pieces here was, you know, there are some places, I think this is probably the lowest hanging fruit, which is, you know, if you look at the studies, a lot of the signage for tobacco is targeted to try and get young people in, and they have shown through the studies that they're actually effective at doing that. We have a business in Family Dollar that consistently has had cigarette, you know, advertisements for cigarettes that are right on the post that are, you drive into town, it's one of the first things that you see. It has an impact on the community in terms of visitors, on our youth, etc. I know that folks in this body, even before I was a part of it, had concerns about what happens is adult use and medicinal marijuana becomes more prevalent, which, I mean, I don't know how many of you have driven 201 from Augusta headed down towards Winthrop, but it's just like ba-boom, ba-boom. You know, they have dispensary after dispensary and visual on that road, and, you know, depending on your point of view, may see that as detrimental to, you know, coming into Manchester, what the feeling of entering Manchester looks like. So, you know, one of the things that I had put here as a potential ordinance change would be under temporary signs. Is I think a low-hanging fruit are controlled substances such as cigarettes, alcohol, and marijuana. Like that, temporary signs, you know, in my opinion, I think aligns with the comprehensive plan that we shouldn't permit temporary signs that advertise those things because they kind of undercut the community values, the other pieces that are put in the comprehensive plan. You know, I would say that there are some other pieces in there that, you know, I think temporary signs at places of business that are there for a long period of time, like we don't put temporary signs up on our building. We're not a retail outlet, so it's a little bit different, but like thinking about what that does look like for an appeal, right? They get, you know, we have in there being left out. When's the last time, Steve, that someone's come in for a permit for a temporary sign that was going to be up for longer than 90 days? Have you ever had someone do that?
I know construction would be the only, like, ones when they redid the hospital up there, that was one of them, that was a temporary sign.
That was part of like a site plan review process.
Yeah, it was, you know, just gave the contractor's name and address and the engineer, so a typical sign you see go up on a construction
Yeah, that's
site.
usually what, you know, that's what I was thinking about, these signs for, you know, if there's a building project and, you know, building materials supplied by, you know, Hammond Lumber or whatever, you know, you see that there for a while. Usually it is relatively temporary.
Right. And and I think the ordinance already spells that out, right, which is real estate signs, anything that's there for, construction and other things. And I mean, some of the construction is going to be pretty straightforward, and Steve's going to have some, you know, direct communication on anyway, because it's part of the process of doing some of this, whereas, you know, retail outlets, right, it's not like they're coming in they shouldn't, for site plan review, for doing their operations, but, right, like, you know, they're putting the stuff up in town. You know, there's got to be a balance. Like, we want to support companies that are doing business that aligns with the values of Pittsfield. We also want to make sure that in doing so, right, like someone comes out and puts a duct tape sign up that says, "Come to my place of business," and it's like in the main thoroughfare coming into town, like, it's probably not, you know, we probably should have something there that's just kind of like, doesn't really
One of the I was gonna say, one of the signs that comes to mind, it was, sorry, for a long time, was in the industrial park for the new extension of the industrial park, you know, the federal government, you know, sign or whatever you wanna call it. That was up
It's
2 or 3 years
Yeah.
or more.
It's still up.
Is it still up?
It's still there, yeah.
Is it really?
Yep, it is.
Was there ever a permit for that?
No, not that I'm not sure what you're talking about. Where is this?
Well, it's right there at the entrance of the new,
The new road?
new road in the industrial park.
At the entrance to that new road that.
Yeah, it basically is a big sign, government project, you know.
Oh.
ARA project.
What's that?
It's the American Recovery
Yeah,
Act.
so some of those are required, as a requirement from the financing point of view,
Right.
or getting grants and so forth. But I'll look into that sign.
Yeah, because it's one of those things, it's been there a long time.
And I mean, I don't think, like I said, none of that's being proposed. I think there could be some places we go beyond what I kind of put here, and I think probably makes sense to do so.
So Vaughn, in this temporary sign zoning ordinance, this isn't completely new, it's just you've added this last.
Just
line
the
on
underlined,
sign,
yeah,
right?
just the underlined section. So all the stuff that's in just regular print is what's on the books now. Anything that's underlined is just additional language.
So, I don't think we can make a motion because we're not in an official,
Yeah.
work. So I would say Mr. Chair, I would suggest that we put this on the agenda for the next meeting to have an official discussion and make a decision on.
Yeah, and there might be another way to approach this, which I'd like to bring up, which is not on the agenda, after we finish this agenda. Okay?
And I would just say the next piece, are there other places with temporary signs that people would want to see, right? If we're going to talk about this and explore it, are there other types of temporary signs that are of concern?
Only during election time.
And of course, we don't have any control over it.
I know,
You just swerve a little bit, Tom.
What was that, what'd you say?
That's it, during election time, all the, candidate signs and everything else kind of get
Garage sales.
I
overwhelming.
think that would be a great idea.
Garage sale signs are huge when that's hot.
But we can't, I think we have limitations on the political signs of state law.
But I think there is law that it has to be taken down at a certain time, I think.
Yeah, 48 hours.
Right, and usually most of them are pretty good, but there was one across the street from my house that didn't, well, my son-in-law went and took it down, I think in April.
I think what happens a lot of times is the candidates have these signs
Right.
and they give them to a group,
Right.
Or somebody that says, give me a half a dozen of those. And somebody puts them out and just never, the candidate doesn't even know they're
No,
there.
and I realize
Yeah.
that, this candidate was from Southern, Lewiston area or something like that, running
Yeah.
for state office, but, so it's one of those things that
Yeah.
they probably had no clue, but someone else put it
Exactly.
there. And the thing was, it wasn't close, it was between houses, kind of near the woods, so nobody else, none of the people that were on that side of the
Nobody
road
cared.
really cared, because it wasn't
Yeah.
close enough to them.
Yeah.
Once the snow came, didn't
course,
see it
it's-
till the snow melted again.
At that point, if a sign is near your property,
Oh, I
or
understand, right.
you can just take it and, then throw it away or do whatever you want with it,
There is some guy that goes out every Thursday and puts stuff all over.
Did you see the roofing signs that were up all over town?
No, so
Yes.
The ones that go onto the telephone poles and everything you see for.
They look like the same sign as you use for a political.
Oh, okay,
There's
yes.
a wire frame.
Right, okay.
Piece of it was a roofing contract.
Right.
It just said roofing and his phone number under it. And I called him and told him he had to get rid of those. He didn't, so I pulled them up. I called him again, told him they're in my office if you wanted them. They're still in my office. I don't know what to do with them.
Probably went out of business.
Then take the wire piece out, put it in the recycling bin. And
Yeah.
I don't know what you're referring to, so I'm just gonna let that go over.
Okay.
We can, smart ass. We can, we'll continue the discussion and maybe get back to putting that on, because I think in some respects it does. You're right, you know, if somebody's going around putting,
Dish Network, like the
Yes.
Dish Network signs that
Yes.
get put on the I-95 entrance in the
Right.
corner.
yeah, or stuff like that, you know, or I think, you know, I haven't seen too many of them this year though, but in the past, there's been, college students that form painting companies and they'll put these signs around, you know, to contact somebody if you want your house painted by some college student or something. So, you know, I mean, that's an issue. That's, you know, they're looking for work, they're looking for jobs. Is there another way that could happen? You know, the idea of cigarettes and all those kinds of things. Yeah, I have no problem with.
So if you had an agency liquor store, you couldn't advertise your sales.
You'd have a sign that says agency liquor store, right?
That's
But
all
you
you'd
wouldn't, you wouldn't be able to put out a temporary sign that
Wouldn't be able
says
to say
special on Jack Daniels.
So I'm gonna- So I need to take a ride down between, where was that you say, Augusta and where?
Down There's dispensaries all over.
And Manhattan and Manchester.
But you know, the reality is it's growing pains, but that's.
Is that to supply all the people going into work in Augusta?
Augusta could be.
At the white buildings, the state buildings?
Could be.
Yeah, the whole road between Augusta and Manchester is kind of lousy with marijuana dispensaries right now.
And I haven't been that way for a while. Last time, well, there's a couple fireworks places, but.
The third item on the.
Well, could we, I mean, if we're gonna bring this to talk, I guess, could I ask a couple clarifying questions?
Yeah,
Jim?
go ahead.
So, like job site signs, right? Should we have clarification on, like temporary, that they need to be at the location of the project?
We have that. There's a requirement for off-site plans, or we're not allowed to have off-site signs. In other words, if you
Okay,
run a business
so
here in
that's-
town, you're not allowed to have something out on Hartman Road saying the way to be a business. It has to be on your site.
So is the fabrication places sign hiring that's on the industrial park sign, is that a?
Well, technically they're an off-site sign, but kindly, I used a little discretion. With that, I thought that, well, it's not offensive. It is, if we can hire people to work, it's going to improve the town. Maybe that sign is the problem.
Sure, I'm asking,
But if it's,
I'm
you know,
asking
if
the
it's a sign that
question.
says I'm selling, I don't know, car parts down across town, then that's an off-site sign and it shouldn't be allowed.
So if we're hiring right now and I put an in-source is now hiring sign up at the industrial park, would that be legitimate?
Well, technically, that would be wrong because it's an off-site sign. But our sign ordinance it's exceeded many times all over town. It's a difficult one to enforce and so forth. The hospital is just going over changing all of their signs to the Northern Light Motel. I say that because the Northern Lights Motel is up in Presque Isle and I stayed there one time.
Ooh.
So the job site ones, they have an off-site and then there's the discretion on enforcement of that, right?
Well, there's no such thing as a written discretion, but
I mean, if someone complained to you about that sign,
Yeah.
you'd probably have to go
yeah,
complain to Chad.
like you do the cigarette, we can do the cigarette sign. Notice they're all gone on the dollar store now. And I'm thinking that one that just come up on a Dunkin' Donuts ought to go away too.
And that's what, yeah, right.
There's a sign there.
They put a new one on the light pole.
Is the nitro sign still out there? I thought they took.
I don't know. I'm just putting examples of things I've seen. Just
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still there or not.
But the scary piece about them, you don't know the cause and effect, right? I've gotten to know the folks out there a little bit for a couple of reasons. 2 weeks ago, they just hired 6 new people there.
Mhm.
You know, that's, you know, how they got those 6, I don't know, but if that's, I thought that was pretty impressive, actually. And they're working on developing, they want more land down at the, they wanna go there. So, you know, I think you kinda have to begin to look at all of the factors.
Well, maybe, I mean, so,
But I think a time frame or a time limit makes a whole lot of sense. Like you said, somebody's selling, yeah, the car parts deal from me, the car's sitting in my driveway, I'm not gonna put that out on Somerset Ave. I'll put the car there, but I won't put the signs there.
The interesting thing you said about hiring 6, that it's interesting, go back in 6 months and see if there's, how many of the 6 are still there, that'll be the interesting part.
Yeah.
Anybody that hires people, knows just what I mean.
Well, and that's, I wanna bring that up.
Right, no, it just-
No, and you're absolutely right, but I'm gonna take a different approach with that.
And I hope, yeah, for their sake and everybody else's sake, that, you know, they hold on, because it just, most of the people that aren't working, that's a good reason for it. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's.
I'm retired, that's why I'm not working.
So, you know,
That's a real good version.
So,
well,
go ahead.
if, I don't know if a lot of the signs that go up around town are advertising jobs, but it seems like it's been mentioned a couple times. Why don't, instead of allowing people to put up signs for jobs, why don't we just have a sign permanently affixed in 2 or 3 spots in town that says, if you're looking for a job, go to the Pittsfield Jobs Board on the town website, and have everybody who, you know, is looking for a painter or is hiring 6 people or something like that, just post for free on the Pittsfield Jobs Board. I've got a new business I'm starting that, you know, I'm painting houses for a living. I'm
You
gonna
are?
put my, no.
Because he said, you wanna come over tomorrow?
But let's say I did, right? I could put it up on the Pittsfield Jobs Board and say, hey, I, you know.
Well, that's,
Yeah, that
and that
might be a
could,
nice thing.
that could be on the town's website. Oh, wouldn't that be interesting?
With that business for hire there, I just couldn't picture myself going over to Nitro Trailer and say, you gotta get rid of that sign. He's gonna say, wait a minute, I'm trying to improve my business and trying to grow here in the town, and you won't let me hire employees?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think
So
that
then I'm gonna ignore that sign.
I think that was a perfectly legitimate choice on your part, right? What I'm saying is there a way we can capture that, right, where a business has 3 spots that they want to fill, and make a central place where everybody knows to go and look, right? Somebody loses their job in town, and there's 10,000 websites out there that help you find a job. What if you just want to look for ones in Pittsfield? Just go to the town website, they're all listed right there.
Could get slippery too, Steve, if you allow one and not others.
You're right, yeah.
I like
Aren't they in the
Ron's
process
idea
of
about
buying more
having
land down there,
on
and
website.
expanding, and putting up, I think there's gonna be a new building, isn't there?
What's that now?
Nitro is gonna be expanding again?
Well, I've heard that rumor,
I have too.
but no formal information on it yet.
But
So getting back to this, so you have teeth for off-site signs? Like you
Have
could,
what now?
off-site temporary signs, you have enough teeth in what's in the ordinance
Yeah,
right now
right,
that
yeah.
Political signs, there's nothing we could do. Though it'd be, I'm kind of, as people brought it up, as you brought up, how, it'd be kind of curious to say, it might be a nice thing from the town of Pittsfield's standpoint, before the election signs come up for November, right, to basically have like there's nothing we can do to regulate this. Here's what's required. You can't put them up before this amount of time. They gotta come down this amount of time. But it might be good neighborliness to knock on the person's door and ask before you put a sign up.
I think there are some places too that I've seen where
restrict
them
Yes.
because of visibility and other things of that sort.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is,
Yes,
yeah.
and that is fairly common.
right.
And
It is against the law, and that, I mean, that's a reportable offense to put a sign a political sign on someone's lawn without their permission.
Yeah, I
If
would
it's
think
in, but
so.
if it's in the federal, if it's in the state highway right away, they can do it without cause. So there was an incident that happened, there was an incident that happened on a social issue in which a specific sign was put in front of a church, and there was nothing that people from there removed the signs and got in
Oh.
trouble for removing the signs.
Yeah,
And it was done in a manner that wasn't
right.
neighborly. Not saying we should do it because of that, but just I know certain folks in town that are very public about, like a business owner in town who, when people come and put signs up on his property that are in a state right away and they have total legality to do, he gets concerned because he has a variety of folks who use his services and doesn't want to be perceived as
Right.
supporting one candidate or another.
Right.
But there could be some leadership that wouldn't be in an ordinance or anything like that, but I don't know whether it's something the planning board would want to do or whether it's the council, just to say, public service announcement. Election cycle's coming.
That should come from the council, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think it should come from the highest body of the land.
I think that, not that in my opinion matters, but I think Lon's thing on signs here is a good idea. Simple to change, and we could do it when we are doing another ordinance to save advertising and so forth.
Well, you want to talk about the backside?
Sure. So then the other piece that was here had to do with tightening up some, a possible tightening up of language on traffic and adequacy of road system. Right now, as our ordinance is set up, we have it set up so that an applicant has a traffic study performed that they pay for, that's done under their direction, and is submitted, that the planning board, I don't think anybody in the town actually reviews. Right? Like when we had the Dunkin' Donuts piece, I came into the town office and asked for a copy of the traffic study so that we could actually take a look at it. I don't think anybody's reviewing the traffic studies with any level of detail. Is that right, Steve?
No, we're relying on the engineer that put his stamp on it.
Right, so basically what's ended up happening is in the site plan review process, what is going on is that we're basically, all we are capable of doing as a body is basically saying, did they submit a traffic study, yes or no? That's it. And that's not really providing any sort of oversight for the community. I mean, during that conversation, I had talked with, my background in civil engineering, I went the structural direction, transportation was part of the same discipline in civil. I talked with friends who are municipal planners, who are town engineers in the southern part of the state, bounced it off of them, and they said, there are certain retail businesses that it would be, they said it more bluntly, but it would not be in the municipality's best interest to not have its own independent study of that impact. Because, right, like there are certain questions that you ask, certain familiarity that we have, et cetera. And what ends up happening is there's risk for the town if we don't provide proper oversight, right? If we put an intersection right near the brink of it needing to be controlled by having a business come in, the next business that comes in is going to be on the hook to have to improve that intersection as part of the expectation of their moving here, which would potentially be a detriment, at which point the town might potentially say, well, bringing in an employer of 20 people is beneficial to the town, so we're going to find some money out of some account within the town to pay for it, right? And so I think, from a planning board perspective, what I had proposed here was having an independent traffic study commissioned by the town and paid for by the applicant for developments that exceed 100 or more peak hour trips for the purposes of assessing the level of service. And so, we already have in the ordinance not underlined that developments which generate 100 or more peak hour trips based on the latest edition of this, boom, has all these different, that's kind of the demarcation between when you have to start having scrutiny. And so the thought here was, this doesn't necessarily have to increase costs at all for the applicant, right? Instead of basically what they would be doing is paying for a study that the town oversees, as opposed to just being hired directly by the, so the town, much like the town has a lawyer, could have an engineering firm that's advocating on its behalf, that's coming in and looking at it through the lens of how would this new development potentially hinder Pittsfield's interests now and into the future, right? As opposed to what happens now is that the engineer comes in and says, okay, will this change, right, the level of service for this intersection right now, so that we can actually make informed decisions on that. So that was the thought with this, is it not being another level of red tape, but just shifting who the responsibility of, or who the engineer's serving in this process. And then the town would have that traffic study. It would be something that we could go over. Whoever the body is that comes in and talks about it could come in talking on our behalf. I mean, I've often felt like here in the planning board, when these things have come up, that it's that I'm being seen as anti-business when I ask questions about this stuff on behalf of the town. I think everybody that's at these desks should be advocating on behalf of the town, and be in a position to do that without feeling like it's being anti-business. We should bake it into the process, if you will, so that we are advocating on behalf of the town and not left in a position where it becomes the planning board doesn't want to let, whatever high volume retail outlet come into Pittsfield. It's more of a, here's what the engineer said and so forth. So that was the thought on this one.
I think as long as it doesn't increase the cost to bring in the business, or like as long as it's shifting costs and not requiring an additional layer of red tape, like you said, I don't see any issue with this. It seems pretty straightforward. You want people who are doing this type of work to be operating in the best interest of the town if we're going to be relying on their decision.
But the applicant is still gonna pay for it.
Right, but the applicant has to pay for it anyways. They just have to pay for it.
I understand that. I just wondered if that engineer wouldn't be influenced by the fact that who he's working for.
He's working for the town, or she's working for the
The
town.
town's not paying him.
Yeah, they are.
No.
But it's paid for by the applicant. But what
Right.
you would end up doing is saying, we would talk with, right, the town would negotiate with an engineer and say, we are going to come to you for a traffic study. We need a price on what that traffic study is. They say it's going to cost $1,200, whatever the cost is going to be, and we'll outline the parameters, and then Steve, you, or whoever it is that's acting on behalf of the town, it's in the application. If you're going to generate X number of trips, your fee is this. If you're going to X, and this pays for the study, and then it's the town that's actually going out and engaging the engineer.
Yeah,
That's the part that matters.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, as long as the town actually writes a check to the engineer.
Yeah, this doesn't
Rather-
clarify that to me. When I put myself in the position of moving into the town or starting up a business and then having to pay for a study that the town, you know what I'm saying? So is there a way that we could word it so that it's clear that that expense will be part of the application fee or part of the, the fee that's charged by the town for that, because of the requirement, because of that 100 miles.
If it's a state road, doesn't the state have to do the traffic study now?
Well, I think that's what we ran into with Dunkin' Donuts. The state, even if we had an engineer say there should be a traffic light there, if the state won't let us turn it on, what good would that be? Right, didn't you say that, Steve? Like, we've got the traffic
It
light.
seems like I can remember, yeah, that.
Good, the traffic light downtown is just blinking because the state, there's nothing we
We
can
could
do.
order that they do it, but the state just wouldn't do it.
Right, exactly. So I mean, we could pay for the money and incur the extra cost of a traffic light that the state won't allow us to turn on, you know what I mean?
So the issue isn't necessarily the study, the issue is who owns the road.
It's what?
The issue isn't necessarily who pays for the study or who does the study.
Right.
It's who owns the road.
Yeah,
And I want to just raise my hand and say that it's not a bad idea to have this in an ordinance, because not every, it's the place where the businesses are concentrated, but not every new business is necessarily going to go on that state road.
Right.
right.
So it could be something that's, if we're not on a state road, then we have more control over what happens. We would anyway,
But we could, but the whole idea of the site plan, we never do this, but we can actually deny the site plan. Right, like if we came in and that was gonna exceed that, and the state said, you know, if there was a conflict with the state regarding that business being placed there, and the road needing to be upgraded and the state not doing it or whatever, we have the ability as a planning board to reject the site plan and say, due to the impact on the level of service for the section, or the impact that it would have in terms of traffic patterns, like, and then it kicks it back to the applicant to find the solution on how to make that work with the state.
goes to the zoning board of appeals after that. Whoever sits on the zoning board of appeals will.
But if we have, right, but if you have it in here, and this is a,
The appeals board can do things.
what's
They
that?
have them. The appeals board can do things. And it depends on who sits on the appeals board at that time, so. But I mean, that's a beginning, it's a start, so.
So with this, commissioned by the town and paid for by the applicant, that would be part of the application fee, is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Okay. So might I suggest then that we take that language out of this section so that it reads, an independent traffic study commissioned by the town is required for developments that exceed 100 or more peak hour trips for the purposes of assessing the level of service. And then in section 7.4.1 application fee, we add language that stipulates that there's this fee that will be assessed to pay for this
Yeah.
traffic study. Because
I think that's important. I mean, this is gonna go before lawyers anyway, so somehow or another we gotta clarify it.
Simone, does that get to the point that you were?
Yeah, it was the wording just wasn't clear. That clarifies it, it gives it another place to clarify it.
If a new business went into the industrial park, where he intercepts the town road, we'd have some control over. But he's gonna affect the intersection up there by Dunkin' Donuts. And so we charge him the fee to do the study, the state won't do it. What do we do then?
That's part of the plan, right? So maybe we need to put language in there. I don't know if we need to put language in there about it, but it says right here, I mean, it says intersections on major access routes to the site within 1 mile of any entrance road which are functioning, right? It already has that language in there.
It's my understanding, and you can sit there and watch, I think. What's the big trucking company that's down with the
Land air.
Land Air? A lot of the trucks in Land Air, when they leave, they will not come out of that exit by Dunkin' Donuts and the shopping center. What they do is they go in the other direction and they go down by Frosty's.
Yeah.
And that's how they'll turn on and go through town. That to me is just it's indicative of an issue. Because some of those trucks that they bring in there, it's not necessarily that the truck is too long. It's that the driver hasn't been driving long enough to know how to get around that stupid thing that's parked in the middle.
Well, the problem is, you know, we go through there with trucks all the time, and there's certain times of day that, you know, I tell my drivers, go around on Crawford Road.
Yep.
Just because, you know, you can get to the end of the road there, and certain times of day, and you got people coming from 95, from town, from across,
Yep.
out of A. Robinson, you know, and there's been a number of times you start to pull out and someone comes flying out of something else that wasn't in the line of sight. So, you know, I'm surprised there's, you know, not a lot of accidents there.
Yeah, that exit at that point isn't really marked. There's no lines on the road to tell you which lane you can be in.
It's-
So
Steve
it
is, sorry, go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I
Is there a document somewhere that says exactly what the fees are?
There is, it's in the front of my book, I don't know if it's in yours or not.
Is it part of the ordinances, or is it outside the ordinance?
But anyway, I think you may have it in your books, I'm not sure, but there it is right there, and, talks about how much for a floodplain permit, subdivision permit, business permits. There's a page that pertains to the planning board. So that we do have something set that the council had voted on in the past.
So, with regards to that document, is that document part of the ordinances, or does it exist outside of the ordinance?
The ordinance is worded so that it gives the council the opportunity to increase the fees as they feel is needed.
Okay.
And then, so that they make the increase and they vote on it.
Yeah. So that comes back to the point of, and paid for by the applicant, you wouldn't even need to change the
Yeah.
application fee section.
You don't, because, well, 7.4.2 has a technical review fee right there.
Right.
It talks about exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
If you look at the second paragraph, technical review fee may be used by the planning board to pay reasonable costs incurred by the board at its discretion, which relate directly to the review of the application pursuant to the review criteria. Such services may include, but need not be limited to, consulting, engineering, and other professional fees, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so I think strike those 6 words, and then I think this is,
Which 6 words?
and paid for by the applicant.
What do other towns do?
Some of them have their own engineer on staff if they're large enough. So
Okay.
they have a city engineer.
And if not,
that would do this.
does the person opening the business pay for the study themselves?
Yeah, and even with the engineer, that's built into their fee
Kind of an
structure.
expected expense for somebody opening a business. So it shouldn't be too much of a surprise.
And recognize a business that's generating 100 trips per day, this isn't a mom and pop business, it's
Yeah,
it's a
Exactly.
higher volume retail business, so
I
it's
don't
not
think there's
like,
anything wrong with having them pay for it.
they already have to pay for one anyway.
Yeah.
Everybody agree with Ron's suggestion about taking the words out?
Yeah.
Geez, you're on a roll tonight.
Do what I do.
Not as long as they know they're gonna pay for it.
So if you're gonna paint, come over tomorrow.
I'll just cancel all my patients.
So Ron, obviously what you
Well, this is
wrote
something-
down there.
This is something we're gonna kick around in the next,
Yeah.
planned meeting.
Read it again.
So my suggestion for the wording for the underlined section is, an independent traffic study commissioned by the town is required for developments that exceed 100 or more peak hour trips for the purposes of assessing the level of service.
I don't think that's clear either,
No.
because the development itself may not exceed 100, but
You just say
the addition of that development may push the level to 100 vehicles per minute, per hour.
That's a good point.
Say that again, what was the?
Well, I mean, so a business that come in, the business itself will not exceed 100 or more peak hour trips.
But it could
But-
be.
The addition of that business to the area could push the entire.
That generate, so generate instead of exceed.
You know, it's, it makes it sound like, you know, so the businesses say, well, we don't generate 100 trips per hour on a peak. But, you know, the addition of that business may take and push everything over for the whole intersection.
So you change the word exceed to generate, which would be consistent with what it is earlier in the ordinance, is that what you're?
Yeah, something like that. We're gonna have to,
I'm supportive of that, changing it to exceed.
because, you know, the way it reads now, the business will say, well, we don't do that, so tough luck. So, you know,
But generate really does open that up
Yeah.
to be,
so if
part
they
of
do it,
the
so, but if the addition of
outcome.
that business.
So that when they bring the McDonald's in on the other side of Rite Aid, that may not bring in an extra 100, but an extra 50 cars is gonna make that really disastrous. I'm not exactly quite sure on the number here, but the A. Robinson that's there, I know somebody that works for that company. That location down there is their second busiest location of the stores that are in that group. The A. Robinson.
I wouldn't be surprised.
No,
It's
very seldom dull.
it's pretty crazy there, and
It is.
Yeah.
you know, so it's not just so any business that wants to add there is going to create, I think, a major issue. So we need to get the Kentucky Fried Chicken to come down someplace else. Where the lot spreads around town, right, Steve?
I saw there was some land for sale over by your house.
There is. That would be great. Okay, so we all kind of set on what we've got to this point.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably not too far off, because the motel could get sold and turned into a fast food joint, so.
It is.
This would make,
That-
this would make a,
That's gonna be a bordello, I heard.
That's,
well, you know, I guess this depends on how many trips.
By the hour, by the day.
moving right along. Okay, the next item on the agenda, I think we can kind of, you had a little piece of paper that answers a lot of questions here.
It's just something we need to be thinking about.
And when I saw that, that was almost exactly what I was, because I'm familiar with this, and you know, sludge and wood ash are potentially two totally different products. You know, there are places, I guess, that mix the two together or things of that sort, but if you're talking wood ash from a generating plant, it's not a sludge product.
Our ordinance was quite unclear on whether that was, residual was considered a wood product or not, if it needed to go through this permitting process. And so I sent the question off to Maine Municipal Association's attorney to see if that was a problem, if the spreading the wood ash needed to go through this whole permit process. And they said by the definition it does. Well, tonight, just before this meeting, Catherine comes up and she heard from the town attorney, and ash is not considered residual. And she says we should go by what the town attorney says. But what we have to do is modify, I believe, we need to modify those ordinances, those sludge ordinances in the book, so that it's clear. And do we need a permit to spread ash, you know?
Wood ash, as I understand right now, is all going to be going through a permitting process or DEP regulations anyways, through the handlers that handle these products for these generating companies.
Right.
Same as that algae fiber that we got before through Casella, you know, their ag division.
Yeah.
wood ash has been spread in Pittsfield before.
There are
30 years
sites-
ago, because I
There are
was,
sites in Pittsfield that licensed by the state of Maine to
right,
take sludge.
my sites, because we permitted for them for spreading ash out of Gorbel Thermal back 30 years ago.
Yeah,
So, you know, for the right situation, it's a good product.
so there's two ordinances. One was a temporary ordinance that was supposed to be taking effect until a permanent one was adopted. They never adopted the permanent one through a formal vote, but Catherine says a number of years ago that we took this book and it was colorized, she calls it. Anything that was in this book was gospel. So all of a sudden now we got two sludge ordinances. And so the major thing is that the attorney from our town attorney realized that it was entitled sludge ordinance. And I think the other attorney from MMA didn't realize that it said sludge ordinance. I think she thought it was maybe sludge and residual
Right.
ordinance. So that changes how you would read the definition, so.
I think we can work the wording out, so there is a clear definition between the wood ash straight wood ash product, and then any sludge product. Because there are places that mixing wood ash with sludge to get it to pass muster, pass test, and be able to be used.
You know, one of the things we simply would just to change the definition. The term residual does not include ash from an incineration of non-coated, non-treated wood or tree bark from a commercial or industrial facility. If that was the definition of residual, you'd be all set to spread your ash. It's an ash.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay. So I guess, and she called me just before I came in here to the meeting. So the question is, can Heather spread her wood ash?
The answer is yes.
Okay, because they want to get started on that. But we have some wording to do on.
The other thing that it would be nice to know is it really wood ash? How do we know?
I think she can verify that.
Yeah,
In fact,
I'm going to ask if they could do that.
yeah, her husband, I thought he was going to be here with something from the person that they bought this from.
I think that
Yeah,
Catherine
that
called and told him about this definition.
Yeah. Was that? Do you know if that came through?
I'm told it came from actual Athens.
Athens.
Yeah.
And they can certify that.
The people she was purchasing there probably was Snowman's, you know, because Snowman's were trying to get in the business of handling this product last year. Because they contacted me and I told them I'd think about it, and they contacted me within a couple of days and wanted to know if I made a decision. I said, well, I'm still thinking. They wanted to drive material or haul material that day. I think they'd get in a little deep or something. But you know, somebody looking at the dollar signs and found out it
Well, if
wasn't
you
there.
could look over those two sludge ordinances sometime, and I'd like to involve Doug Donahue too, and see if we can come up with some wording that makes sense.
Who's Doug Donahue?
Heather's
Who's Doug?
husband.
Sorry.
Allen.
I wasn't
Allen
talking.
Farms.
The other thing, if you wanted, I probably could get a hold of Rob Folsom from Casella, that he could come in and speak and probably give some information and analysis on these different products. That,
Yeah.
you know,
But anyway, I think that would be something that ought to be addressed. If somebody wants to spread sludge, it's going to cost them $1,500 for the application on the vote. I think it was $25,000 in an account to do a study with before they could do it. It just makes it impossible, and maybe we want to keep it impossible for sludge, but maybe not for ash. Ash is a wood product that
right.
is good for the soil.
And you know, there's a number of other products out there that that are being used. You know, that algae fiber product, which is basically seaweed and lime mixed together, and then there's what they call mill lime. Lime paper mills use to coat paper and bleach, not bleach paper, but paper coating. Once it goes through, they're done with it, and basically all they've done is taken some of the lime value away. But it's a product that is thousands of tons of that moved out there. But that's, you know, at that point, that's still pretty much a straight agricultural product, you know, so there's, you know, we've used hundreds and hundreds of tons of that over the years. Because there is no definition of sludge or anything else, it's just lime.
Yeah. Well, that's our task anyways, to try to resolve that sludge ordinance so it makes sense.
Okay, so it looks like, first of all, we need to pronounce our words very carefully. Secondly,
Or maybe the guy listening has to listen.
yeah, listen here, a little bit more diligence. There was one other item I'd like to kind of discuss, and I know it's getting a little late, but Steve and I have had a discussion a couple of times, and I told him that I would give him the opportunity to leave the room at this point if he wished to.
For Steve to leave or us to leave?
But I think he's going to stay. Because I think, you know, we've talked about signs and traffic and the quality of roads and all of those kinds of things. Steve and I took a ride a couple weeks ago. There are 9 places in town that really should have had some kind of legal action taken against them because of the condition of the property and so forth. And that has not happened. In addition to that, in case you've traveled around town a little bit more recently, I think there are a couple of places that have been added to that list about, and I know it's kind of corny maybe, and I joke about it with certain people about making sure that your lawn isn't more than 6 inches, but there's quite a number of houses now that are really beginning to, and if we are trying to bring people into town, it's more than just getting off of exit 150 and riding down Somerset Avenue. And, you know, are there some, and I'm going to frame it this way, are there some things that can be done to support Steve to make sure that he can do the job that he needs to get done?
You mean like buying a shiny badge?
I think Steve needs to tell us what we can do to help him.
Well, what has to happen is the town has to appropriate money and the council has to approve legal action. You know, there's just so many times that I can tell a person he's got to clean up trash, he's got to do this, he's got to do that, write him letters. If it don't happen, that word spreads like wildfire. And then everybody else said, well, you know, he didn't do anything to him, he didn't do anything to her or whatever.
And I guess I was, after Steve and I took the ride, I guess I was really surprised. And it's kind of ironic. I'm not sure who's watching this. I've had a chance, like some other people in town, I've had a chance to talk several times with the new the head of school, new title, at MCI recently. You know, he talks about the town and coming here and what a nice place it is. And somebody in my family had an appointment today at another place out of town, and they got into a discussion about how they happened to come into Pittsfield to have a meal at Papa Nover's and were really kind of impressed with what they saw up to a certain point. And I think if we're going to do things to get people to come into town, that, you know, if it's just appropriating money, you know, that's a piece of it. But I also think that there's a bigger picture. One of the things that we've talked about with the bicentennial ending this year is maybe that become something that transform into something else that becomes really a community development kind of program for future years. as a possibility. I know that there are some other people in town that have talked, and I know a little bit about the Main Street project in Skowhegan and some other places. I think there's a lot there that's out there. We just need to tap in and figure out. The other possibility is pulling some business leaders together, and I know there's right now 6 or 7 that are willing to sit down and begin a discussion about that in terms of what do they need as small business owners in town to get the word out there that, you know, there are some possibilities here. But you know, you ride by what used to be the old pharmacy. Excuse me, it looks like hell from the road across the street from Vaughn's place. You know, and that's right on the main drag. You know, how much does it really cost to go in and cut that down? Yeah, you can keep things up. You know, you don't have to necessarily have something in there, but you can have the building at least look a little bit more respectable. And it does after the winter's gone, when the grass is all dead. But you know, there are some things that can happen that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, but it involves a vision, I guess. And I think maybe one of the ideas with some of the discussion is taking some of the whatever comes out of the conclusion of the bicentennial committee, just as an example, but to create a vision for, you know, what kinds of businesses do we want to do? How do we go about getting those? But you know, Steve is working his butt off. He really is. And you know, the example that he gave, I mean, that's crazy. You know, he said, you know, people know that we're not going to take it to court because we don't have any money. So what the hell?
Legally, is there a way, if things do go to court, that the fees would go against them or add to their property taxes, or I don't know legally how things can change.
The court can award fees, can award attorney's fees. And we did that on this fellow up on Leonard Street. And he was fined $3,000, he had to put up a fence, and he had to pay the court costs. It didn't sink in, the place is going right back to where it was. We got to take him to court again. But anyway, that was an example where he did pay the court costs, and it wasn't that expensive for us to do it.
You know, I was thinking about renting a van for tomorrow night, and after the council meeting is over, putting all the councilors in the van and driving through town. And let me look at some of the places. That will go over big, guys. I'm sorry, but I'm dead serious.
But it'll be dark.
That's even better.
Good point. Well, I think you're talking about a couple of different things there, right? First,
all over the place. Sure.
First, gathering the counselors and then getting them.
Yeah.
No, but so chiefly to your first point, the council is doing the 2020 budget right now. So if we're going to find a way to make sure that there's money appropriated to do what we need to do, or so Steve can do what he needs to do with code enforcement, then now's the time to ask.
Well, that is the plan. That's why we come up with the nine homes.
So,
but that means that we're going to have to wait until next spring before we can get any of that accomplished. It would be nice if we could take people to court now.
Are we approaching this the right way? I mean, it's like the death penalty hasn't really deterred anybody from committing heinous crimes. And here we are taking people to court that have nothing, or they hide it well, or just don't want to put it where we would like them to put it. And they're paying these fines, putting up the fences, and going right back to their old ways. Is there something else that we can come up with that doesn't entail going to court, that makes us a better people, and fixes things? I mean, I've got 4 houses right on our immediate block, And I can tell you something else that I heard from another neighbor. The rats are coming.
We know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
We
because
addressed
people are
that.
not taking their garbage to the dump frequently enough. And we're on the stream, you're on the stream, I'm on the stream, and if they're coming from the river, I don't know. And people say, well, those are river rats. I'm sorry, to me, a rat's a rat. And I don't want them coming into my house, chewing holes and
They're getting
into
pretty close to
whatever.
your house, aren't they?
Huh?
They're getting pretty close to your house.
Yes, they're
Yeah.
a little uncomfortable.
But I talked to that fellow today, Don Shute and I have been over there,
Yeah.
and he is gonna start mowing his back lawn to give, so that they don't hide it.
I'd like to see
He's
that.
got several traps set out, we gave him some information on the new way to deal with them.
Uh-huh.
And he came into my office on his own, basically, and explained all the things he was doing, and we were encouraged about it.
I hope so, Steve, because I know they don't have any
And
money.
I told him 3 or 4 times, you make sure there's no food whatsoever for those rats.
Rats
Because
go
they'll
with
go
his
away
food.
if there's no food.
They go with his food, is right.
And just don't name them. Don't give
No
rats a
pet
name.
names,
We're gonna
no,
have a
no.
pet. But you know,
Ben.
but the other side of the coin is, and I know this sounds like the prophet of doom, and I mentioned this to Steve a couple of times. You know, the house that's on Somerset Avenue. Whose house is it?
Clyde Dyer.
Clyde Dyer's house with those ladders up there.
That's dangerous.
Kids are gonna, so they're gonna be,
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
are gonna climb those ladders, and somebody is gonna get hurt.
What about that big beautiful house on Heartland Avenue? Gorgeous. The grass must be 3 feet high.
Safety Russell.
Front door is wide open.
Yep.
You can walk through it, and it's just a setup for something bad to happen.
The doors open on that one, that's on South Street?
Yes.
On Heartland Avenue,
Yeah,
across
South
from the
Street.
pond. The big beautiful
Took
Yeah,
Victorian.
yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't realize there was a door open.
yeah.
Uh,
You can walk right in.
yeah.
Then there's the maroon one on
Oh, I
South
know.
Street.
I know what I was gonna say, the ladder, the one ladder is kinda half tied off. I did talk with him, and he did, he tied that ladder off, and supposedly he's doing some measurements and getting the roof ordered for this metal roof ordered.
Is
The
there,
one next
is there,
to
I don't believe him, but that's what he told me.
Is
The
there
one
been a
across
building-
from you, Simone's got a hole
Oh.
in that roof.
That's the.
I talked to Steve about that.
That's the one you're talking
I
about?
mean,
That's what I'm
yeah.
talking about, yeah.
And that, I mean, there has to be snow and rain and
I don't
everything. There's
see
gotta be
anything
mold
happening
and
there.
They're actually painting
Where?
front, looks like they painted
Yeah, he's been
the
spraying
front trim
paint.
work when I
Oh,
walked
really?
past it today.
Really?
Yeah.
He's my age, and he says he's gonna put a roof on that himself.
Oh, my
Oh,
word.
gee. But he doesn't get around like you, Steve. He doesn't get around well at all. I mean, he comes over there and he does something for 2 hours and he's gone and he doesn't come back for,
And he's made a worse mess than before he got there. And he does. I'm hoping to catch up with him sometime this week. He's one of the 9 on the list, but I'm hoping to catch up with him Wednesday. He's supposedly up here for,
What about that maroon house on South Street? Is that full of mold? I've been told.
I've never been in it, I don't know.
So some of these are foreclosures, some of these are actively owned by folks.
None of the 9 are foreclosures.
None of the 9 that you looked at were foreclosed upon. They're
Yeah.
but no one is living in them at this point? Is that how they are?
Some,
Technically, I guess, there are places that are for shelter, whether they're actually living in it.
Shelter for what? Rats?
I don't know.
we,
God.
But I think,
Just
you
when
know,
you thought it
the
couldn't get
house
worse.
that's on, yep,
Thinking.
most of them are vacant, I think.
Yeah,
I'd have
most-
to see the list to be sure, but I think most of them are vacant.
you know, I mean, as a group, we can support, get to council members and say, make sure you put money in the budget, allegedly it's gonna be a separate fund or something like that, but from my perspective, and it's probably wrong, this is much an economic development issue as hiring a company to come in and do videotapes around town. that people are they're gonna ride through, they're gonna see these places, and they're gonna say, wow, you know, and then all of a sudden they're gonna see something else, and they're gonna say, no, this isn't really what I'm looking for. And, I mean, I'm not feeling sorry for Steve, well, I am a little bit feeling sorry for Steve, because he really is trying, but when somebody says, no, I'm not gonna do anything, what's the next step?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're up on taxes, they paid their property taxes on all these
I
properties?
think most of them have.
Most of them
In
have.
other words, yeah.
Check out the council meeting tomorrow night, because there's an item on the council tomorrow night that, and it's probably because of Pete Vigu, that are coming off the books from 1998, and I'm not exactly quite sure what that's all about, whether they've been carried for X number of years. Again, same issues. You know, there's no follow-up, there's no follow-through on things, and
What's been carried?
there are some houses that are gonna be going up for auction. Okay, but the council has to approve that tomorrow night. You
Hey,
know,
for every house that doesn't pay its taxes, the rest of us have to pick up that slack.
Exactly.
Yep.
And you're saying that these are ones that the town already owns, or these are ones that the town is going to own because of tax default?
I think that the town, I'm not sure one.
Well, today she sent me out to take pictures of the houses that were going up for tax, that are tax acquired properties as of December 20th of 2018. And so there's one out on Route 2, it used to be the dog kennel place out there, it's right across from Powers Road.
Oh, that's all burnt out.
The house itself is not burned out.
Oh.
It's just the lean-tos, which are good, they should have gone anyway. There's one on North Main Street, just this side of the veterinarian's place. There's the other one is
There's one on
the
South
other one's on
Main.
the corner of Waverly and Madawaska. And then down on Route 69, just before the Detroit town line, there's a nice looking mobile home and garage that sits way back up in the field. And another strangely looking four-sided building beside it that's coming up for auction.
Those places?
Yeah, all those places.
And isn't there something on South Main Street out of town also, I think?
Well, those are the only places with buildings. There is lots, there is a couple of house lots that are gonna go up too.
Right.
I mean, some of these have been carried since 1998 on the books.
It's ridiculous.
I don't know about that, I didn't know which ones I took pictures of today.
I know there are houses, you know, in different places that are sitting idle because of people in nursing home, and basically it's in limbo with the state right now. You know, I get my in-laws' house is that way. So, you know, I don't know at what point,
answer
you know,
is.
my understanding is nobody can do anything till the person passes. And then at that point, the state usually, I think, puts it up for sale or something, but the problem is these places, if they sit idle for 10 years, 15 years, by the time they come up for sale, there isn't much there to sell.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's some services out there provided by different agencies, and I'm going to use AARP as one, okay, that help in those kinds of situations with senior citizens. Because that's, you know, as we all know, Maine is a pretty old state. Just look at Royce and me.
Ancients.
Huh?
Ancients.
Ancients.
Yeah,
But there are some things that people, there are some agencies that can kind of help guide people through, here's what you should do if and when these kinds of things happen. And maybe that's the kind of services that we should begin offering people in town as well. Because that's, again, if people know that those kinds of things are available, maybe they might be more willing to move to town because they know that, is there a possibility that any of these that he went out and took pictures of today, could any of those be flipped and resold? Could they be restored somehow and be sold at a reasonable price that somebody who's looking for a starter home could buy? Have we thought about that as a possibility? I don't know. I don't know. And is that our responsibility as the planning board? I think it is. I really do. Of course, it's the responsibility of everybody that lives in town, but
Yeah.
sorry.
Sure.
Can I give 2 reports before we leave? So, Heather Donahue and I convened a group of folks from Pittsfield to meet with Ann Ball from the Maine Development Foundation, who oversees the Main Street programs, the Maine Downtown Center. It was actually her first time in Pittsfield, and she was pretty blown away.
In a good way.
In a good way, oh yeah. Totally. Just, the assets we met at the library, so she saw that. She saw the train station, the Olmsted Park. She was taken into the UU Church and saw all of the Harry Cochran art that's in there. And she was blown away by the park. She said in all the towns in Maine that she's been in, she's never seen such a kind of system of, what's that?
What park are you talking about?
Manson Park. But it wasn't just Manson, it was just kind of the collection of parks within a downtown area, she said, of all the places that she's been in Maine, as far as kind of having them that central to downtown. So there was interest. So the Main Street programs essentially utilize national principles that have been effective at helping to rejuvenate downtowns. They have an affiliate program. It's not that expensive to join. You don't even have to have a full-time employee to be part of it. In order to get the resources, there's some training resources, there's networking resources, there's if Pittsfield were to do it, it also, by being a Main affiliate, if there are grant funds that are available for certain projects, opens up more accessibility for Pittsfield. So that was a very promising meeting. It's going to take legwork in order for it to happen. There were folks there representing MCI, young folks, a variety of different constituencies across the small businesses, downtown businesses, etc. So that's going to continue to be, we're going to continue to look at that and see, because I think some of this stuff, as we've talked about, can't really happen from municipal government. It really needs to happen with public-private partnerships and nonprofits and things like that.
Yeah.
So that, I think, it's always great to see like the potential through the eyes of people that come into this town and see the bones that we have. I had a conversation regarding the SAS mill with a person at CEI, Coastal Enterprises, who's a community development financial institution based in Brunswick. They do a lot of investment in small businesses and a variety of things around the state. I was meeting with him on something else entirely, and we got to talking about some things, and he's like, I have binders full of developers who would be interested in potentially looking at a property like that. Whether they get here and see it and the trust that owns that, whatever happens. But I think as there's sometimes in Pittsfield, because we're surrounded by the fishbowl of Pittsfield, that we sometimes just kind of it becomes a little bit overwhelming, like some of the challenges that we have. But I think as people come in and see it, that are looking at the assets, it's a very strong place and some really good opportunities. So that was some promising piece. I also wanted to, I got approached by the Community Development Foundation, Maine Community Development Foundation, that distributes funds across Maine for various programs. They manage some programs, they give out grants across the state, they manage, I can't remember how many millions of funds and so forth. They've never had anybody from Pittsfield serve on their advisory. There's a Western Mountains group that focuses on Somerset and Franklin County. They have very few applicants from Pittsfield. MCI is really the only institution that reaches out for them for funds. I was asked to become an advisor on that board. There's like 9 folks representing Franklin and Somerset County, and I accepted that. The piece of that is that in accepting that, I need to step down from the planning board from a time commitment piece. So between my family, my work, and that piece, I felt like I could be a better service to Pittsfield by helping network it with that piece. So the next planning board meeting, I'll submit a formal letter, but next planning board meeting, I'm expecting to be my last. Obviously, I'm going to be in Pittsfield, and obviously, if there's stuff that I can, the stuff
Come
that's,
visit us and sit and.
yeah, exactly. Like when there's stuff that's going on, I'm happy to be a participant. It's just that, my kids need me. I'm the only dad that they have, and so I can't continue to pile on other things and not have it impact them. So I've really enjoyed serving on the planning board with everybody, and appreciate the work.
Well,
everybody
thanks
does.
for everything, Glenn, that you've done. We'll miss you.
Thank you.
We won't miss you.
I'll be here next week, and like I said,
But congratulations, that's good news
thanks.
for you. And,
Well,
and for the
I'm
town.
hoping for the town that it
Yeah.
will help the network.
Yeah.
They'll help increase the networks to deal with the exact issues that we
Sounds
consistently come up in front of us. So.
For the time being, we'll still be covered for enough people to.
We have, well,
So,
forward,
we can-
Is
with
Ryan
one-
look.
another alternate. will
Right,
have
we'll look,
up,
yeah.
And then we'll look for.
We still have Brent, right?
Pardon me?
Did Brent?
Yeah, Brandon's phone just off.
Yeah.
I think
And Mo?
Mo was
Mo is-
an alternate, so
Yeah,
he
I think he's the oldest one.
Is the next day.
Yeah.
Tenured, not oldest.
Right. I was trying to think of a good way to say that, and
Next on the-
I know I'm the oldest.
Yeah, so next on the next one is totally wrong, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that Mo was ahead of him, so. Mo.
That's what I meant to say.
Next in line.
Next in line, there you go.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments,
No,
concerns?
we're leaving now.
When you go out of Pittsfield, if you take Pittsfield exit and get off, if you go west out of town, things look good. Things are usually kept mowed and green. Not just by me, but
Yeah.
I do the big part, but it's easier than the small parts. No, and I think they try to, Pete and Ian try to make sure to do a decent job and keep things looking good.
Has anyone noticed what they've done to the buildings out on the Spring Road?
Which,
No.
the state building?
The DOT buildings out on the Spring Road.
Yeah.
Take a ride out and look at those.
No kidding.
They're hot top, they're painted, they got gates.
Is
Nice.
that the one opposite the pond?
No.
Further out
Further
on
out.
Spring Road?
What's it being used for?
He stores boats and campers and so forth in it.
And piece of property, Andy Vigil mostly.
Oh,
But anyway, he's just amazed how nicely he's fixed them up and how
Nice.
attractive they are.
There is one piece of farm equipment in there that I know of. They borrowed one last year, and they said, "Well, do you want us to put it away?" It's a good building, put it in. It doesn't get used a lot, So,
Probably gets polished every time it's used.
Yes, Vaughn, thank you. We're gonna miss your input.
Okay, have a